Hello and welcome to What's the Big Idea? I'm your host, Paige Curtis. Today's episode is brought to you by Destination Imagination, commonly referred to as DI, the leading creative problem-solving experience for children. Through DI's innovative project-based educational experiences, participants gain the skills that will set them up for success in careers like the one we're going to hear about today. Learn more about DI at destinationimagination.org. On today's episode, we are pleased to welcome Marshall Rainey. Marshall Rainey is a visual effects artist originally from Colorado. Marshall is a graduate of the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, and he earned his master's degree in cinematography and film and video production from Loyola Marymount University. Marshall has an impressive resume in the film industry, including as a member of the visual effects team for titles such as Zack Snyder's Justice League, Godzilla vs. Kong, and the upcoming film adaptation of The Flash. I'm also so proud to tell you that Marshall is an alum of Destination Imagination and has been engaged in creative problem solving since kindergarten. Joining us today from South Park, Colorado, please welcome Marshall Rainey. Marshall, thank you for joining us on What's the Big Idea?
Thank you for having me, Paige.
I would love for you to get started just by giving us an overview of you and your amazing job.
Yeah, I started my job around 6 years ago, and I had met a makeup artist in LA who got me in touch with one of the execs at Paramount, at the Paramount Studios. And she goes, "Do you want to interview for this position for Star Trek Beyond?" And I hesitated at first, because I was like, I've never had this question asked to me before. And I said, of course I do. What do I have to do? So she's like, send me your resume. And it was for a visual effects production assistant position. I knew nothing about visual effects back then. So I didn't think I was going to get the job. And I walked in and I met this exec and I met the producer, and I ended up talking to them for about an hour and then had a second interview the next week. And then after that, I got the job and I was like, wow, okay. So I had no idea what the job was going to entail. This was a huge movie. And so from there, I quickly learned a lot. And from that project has led me to my future jobs and movies within the business.
Amazing. So I caught Godzilla versus Kong right when it came out because it was just the amount of escapism I needed within a movie. But I would love to hear more about exactly what visual effects means. What's a day in the life of working as a visual effects artist?
Totally. So I work with the assets that we create. So basically everything that is not shot. So when you shoot something on green screen, such as Godzilla versus Kong, the title characters did not show up to set. We create them in post. And so when on set, you have to get a good idea. Okay, how tall is King Kong? How tall is Godzilla? Well, King Kong is roughly 350 feet. Godzilla is roughly over 700 feet. So you need to have actors' eye lines in appropriate positions to when you're filming it on a green screen. So later you can implement that material in post to create that CG environment, whether that's destroying a city like Hong Kong in Godzilla versus Kong, or Middle Earth, Hollow Earth, underwater scenes, anything in that capacity. So I'm in charge of dealing with the assets and dealing with a visual effects vendor, a house, if you will, that's what we call them, that will be creating these digital creatures or digital environments, or let's say a practical explosion off of an actor's arm, or their head explodes or something like that. So we create then what's called a digital double of that actor. So we can implement those effects to that person, obviously without any harm. And then my job throughout the post process is to track those assets, present them to the director, to the producer, to the studio, making sure that the house is the visual effects house is within budget, on time. So it's a project management, but also very creative line of work.
So that's what I was going to say. You're really talking about a lot of the skills practiced by destination imagination students. No wonder you have to have that ability to imagine things that aren't actually happening to make it believable for your audience. I never would have thought that you really do need the lines of sight to be so clear. So when we're talking about things like the 4 C's, which is communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity, give us some more examples of times when you use that in your work.
Collaboration. I mean, every meeting that we have with, whether that's with the director, so let me kind of start back. Creative discussions when the movie's in a script phase, right? So we don't have any visuals yet. We just have concept art. We have something called pre-visualization. So we have these artists come in and basically pre-visualize what we're going to be filming. So that collaboration with all these artists all over the world, we're dealing with people in New Zealand, Australia, London, South Korea, Vancouver, and in Los Angeles. So and Montreal. So we're dealing with tons of different ideas, and so we have to collaborate. And ultimately, the director, or the producer, studio gets final say because it always comes down to budget. But they're very open to listen to other people's ideas and their their creative ideas. So different, it's like for an underwater scene, okay, how we're going to shoot this. The director might not know how to film that, so they're going to collaborate with our visual effects supervisor, and then the vendor house's supervisor, who's actually going to be doing most of the work on that too. So every day is a different, you walk in with the day with a set schedule and kind of like, here's kind of our preliminary idea of what we think is going to happen. And then you have to be able to basically go to plan B, if you will. And so for me, I did improv. I helped with the improv challenge, for DI. And that helps a lot with going in with, an idea and not saying no, saying yes. Okay, let's do that. Let's add this element to it. So it's a lot of and sorry, one more thing too. Going with the improv challenge, improv is such a unique idea and concept of, okay, you're going to bring strangers together and create this skit, and you have a certain amount of elements you have to meet and tasks you have to fulfill, and dealing with people that I've never met before all over the world. Understanding, okay, it might be a cultural thing that I need to understand about who I'm talking to. There's so many different elements within my line of work too, that just DI had taught me so much of that. And also going back to my first job interview, walking into that job interview and basically being able to talk to them is how I got the job. It's not because I didn't know the content. I didn't know what I was doing. I just walked in, presented myself confidently, and was able to have a conversation with them too.
So it's an amazing story. And I hear the red thread as you're talking about that from your experience working in improv. I even heard the yes and when you were talking about that, and the cultural collaboration. And it's wonderful to hear that you were able to take that confidence into your job interview and then learn on the job. I mean, what was that learning curve like as you were learning about visual effects?
Yeah, it was huge. I would say that the joy that I have gotten, I've just been really lucky with the people that I've worked with. Like anybody, you're walking into a job and you don't know these people, you don't know their backgrounds, you're going to have differences. And as you should, we all should be different and come in with different ideas and different beliefs. And we all have different backgrounds of upbringing. And so with that first project, my immediate production manager ended up being, this is the craziest story too, and I'll segue that in a second, but she was an amazing woman that just held my hand and I'm an eager person to learn something if I don't know it. So I'll sit there and be like, yes, I want to know this. I want to learn this. And so she really helped me do that. And within that first movie, I actually, my job title was increased by 2 different positions, it was which is unheard of within a movie time span. Usually you have that title for the duration of the project. And then after that project ends, you go on to the next, from that project, you'll get a title bump, if you will.
Yeah. So
and
you learned
that
quickly.
was amazing. Learned very quickly. And funny enough, her husband did the music for the Los Angeles DI tournament, for the regional tournament.
Oh, wow.
So it was a small world. And once we collaborated she goes, because I was like, I have to be, this Saturday I'm unavailable. It's the region, I volunteer for this nonprofit. Was telling them about DI. And she goes, oh yeah, my husband's going to be there. And I'm going, wait, what? So that was just a small world too of how then that our bond, and I still message with her, every month, and she knows quite a few people in the business too. So another thing too is I've gotten my next project from people that I know. You have to have a good work discipline. I'm not going to deny that. You have to sit there and, the job, because you're on set, and so being on set is very. It can take its toll. I mean, some days you're on set for 12 hours and you might be outside, you might be shooting on location, which has its challenges too. So, you have to keep that good energy up, that positive energy up, and be able to talk to people, on the 10th hour of a work day when you're tired and you want to go home. But the job is, okay, let's focus and let's get this done so then we can go home.
Mm-hmm. It's a dynamic work environment, certainly. I want to take you back to that tournament and the tournaments that you did as a student and your years as a student. Can you tell us about some projects or activities that you did when you were in grade school that helped you become the professional that you are today?
I've always loved people. I've been a people person. I've always had a personality, if you will. For better or worse. And growing up, I think that taught me, being in gifted and talented programs within my elementary school, being on the same DI team so I was on the same DI, well, it was the other program back then, but being with the same people through 5th grade and really learning, like that's, elementary school, you're learning so much just about public speaking and confidence and what it is to just stand on a stage in front of 100 people type of thing. And not a lot of kids necessarily like that or want to do that. They want to shine in another way. And then in middle school and high school, I was on a separate team with a separate group of students. And, I think from different activities I would do within school, whether that was theater, I did musical theater, all through middle school and high school. I played soccer as well. I played team soccer, like club soccer, and then high school soccer. So, and then as well as just in school, I was in choir. I was in the all-state choir for Colorado. So I was always around a team building, a team, if you will, of people, and having to be a part, being an all-state choir is different than being on the soccer field. At the same time. So you have to kind of understand those dynamics too. And I think that taught me a lot of how to adapt and be around different personalities.
Absolutely. That's definitely a dynamic set of extracurricular activities. So again, what I'm hearing a lot of is the teamwork aspect that's so relevant in your job. It's time for us to take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back with Marshall Rainey.
Are you brand new to Destination Imagination and ready to learn more? Join us for an introductory webinar. These 45-minute information sessions are designed for parents, educators, and volunteers who are ready to learn the basics of DI and how to get started. Sign up to attend a complimentary live session online or download the captioned video on demand. Register today at destinationimagination.org/thebigidea.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to What's the Big Idea? I'm here with our guest, Marshall Rainey. Our listeners may not know that it takes so many people in so many different roles to create a film. So I want to know, what behind the scenes roles do you think deserve more recognition?
There's something called the assistant director, and that is not the director's assistant. It's the assistant director is the schedule. They are the schedule of the day to day, and they are the most underappreciated people on set. They have a whole team behind them too, but that is actually something that I wanted to do. I thought that I wanted to do, and it's brutal hours. You're up at the crack of dawn, which I don't mind. I'm a morning person, so let's get the show on the road. But so basically, when you're scheduling out a movie, you have all these actors and all their times that they have to be filmed within their, if an actor is on another movie or a TV show, you have to film them out within a set amount of days. So you might be shooting scene 2 and scene 87 next to each other because that actor has to go. So it's a very challenging position to kind of make sure that everybody's happy. If you're on location, you have to, you just have to work with that location, right? You have to be very respectful of that location and go in and go out. And so, the schedule around a movie is quite insane. And I've been a part of some of those conversations before, which is fascinating because you're being a listener in that, you're learning a lot. But to be fair too, I mean, every position, what is so amazing about film, and when you're on set, it's such a palpable family, a community that you just don't, it's weird because you're like in the trenches together, for better or worse. Some days are going to be not as good as others, and you're going to get through it because you're going to be with the people. It's like, for us, we work with maybe a prosthetic hand on an actor. Well, you have to work with the costumes department with that. You have to work with makeup. You will have to work with lighting. You'll have to, collaborate with all these different departments in order to get that one shot off, which is quite impressive. And then on top of that, you have to work with the camera department to make sure that they're in focus. And so you do rehearsals. And so also the first AC, the first assistant camera, is a job too that goes under notice because they're the ones that pull focus on the movie. So it's seamless, right? Because we watch a movie, everything's in focus. If it's not, that person wouldn't have a job. So it's a very under that specific job too. Actors also, I have a new appreciation for actors. When I started working with what I do, an actor has to hit their marks. They have to speak where the microphone is. They got to look pretty, which sometimes the amount of hair and makeup that you have to go through to get somebody to look like that is quite impressive as well. So
a lot of different moving parts. Those are a lot of things that I certainly wouldn't have considered. Parts. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you have to be on the same page too, collaborating, be like, okay, you have to talk to costumes. Okay, how many different wardrobe outfits do they have to go through? How many also copies of that costume do they have? So if it gets wet or if it gets destroyed or if it gets lit on fire, you have to talk about these things because you also, okay, cut, go back to one, reset. Okay, well, maybe we can't reset. We just blew up a house. So how are we going to do that? So there's a lot of moving parts in a movie.
So we're talking about a lot of being on set, cross collaboration, all of these different departments. The pandemic happens. Everything changes in my world. Lots of people are starting to work remotely. How has making movies changed during pandemic times?
Yeah, it was a real struggle, actually. For a long time, I had a ton of my friends and old coworkers and people that I knew just didn't have a job. Actors, especially, because a lot of actors are, aspiring actors. They also wait tables on the side, or they do different gigs on the side. Well, all of that shut down, right? Mm-hmm. Restaurants shut down. You didn't have live theater. You didn't have these concerts. I got super lucky. I worked on the 2017 Justice League, which is a whole nother podcast in itself. And then I was lucky enough to be asked to come on to Zack Snyder's cut for the 2021. So we finished Godzilla versus Kong in the pandemic, right? March 13th, 2020, Friday the 13th, we're like, take your stuff home, work from home for 2 weeks. We'll see you guys by Easter. Well, cut to now, and I'm still working remotely. And, but we had already filmed most of the footage for the Snyder cut of Justice League. So super lucky that we had all of that content, so we could work remotely. You could sit there and be able to have these reviews with the director, with the producers, because of technology where it's at. You are all looking at the same image, and we're all be able to be safe to do about it. I think what will change is that we will realize, like, when it comes down to post, you don't need to all be in the same room, because we all experienced finishing a project, and a lot of people that were in post in similar positions for me on different movies, same thing. So, being on set, the movie that I'm currently working on, they have very restrictive. They're filming in London. You have to go through different protocols every single day with COVID. They're not allowing as many people on set, because before it was not a free for all, but you could go and interchangeably walk on sets and see what's happening and things like that. Obviously you had to be on the project, couldn't just be a random stranger. But now you even if you're working on that project, you have to have certain, you have to meet a certain level tier to be able to go on and to be a part of it. Like, and some actors I know, they refuse to be on set with a certain amount of people too, which is out of safety. It's absolutely, that's what it should be too.
So The Flash is slated to open in 2022. Tell us about that project.
Yeah, so I started it in March of 2021, and they're filming in London through October, and then we'll be in post for about a year. And so it's the most challenging project that I've been on, not because it's remote work, it's because of the technology that we're using, and the basically the manipulation of actors. Because of COVID, it's like we're just shooting one actor at a time in certain circumstances. And so it's then you're implementing like two images then back, on the same screen, which is not unheard of. That happens more than you think, but it requires a lot. It requires camera has to be the exact same. The background has to be the exact same. Hair and makeup have to be the exact same on, if they're in different locations. Like, for instance, I'll give you a little example. We did reshoots for the 2017 Justice League. Gal Gadot was pregnant, Wonder Woman. We filmed her in Burbank. Everybody else was shot in London, but we had to film her also waist up because she's pregnant. So there's a couple shots of the movie where Wonder Woman is, with the rest of the Justice League, but she's not filmed in the same location as them. So it's a lot of communication, figuring out, okay, this is what we're doing in this spot. This has to be the exact same for that spot too. So making sure that everybody is clear, and you have, meetings and tons of prep to do that, to make sure that all those elements are there. But so with The Flash, it's also the longest shoot that I'll have been on, even though I'm not on it, but it's still the day-to-day is talking to the team in London, making sure that all the data, right? Because I have to collect all the data. So making sure that, and being not on set, it's quite challenging sometimes to be like, okay, making sure that I got everything today. And we're dealing with like petabytes of data, like huge server rooms that I have to learn about too. That's something that, again, with every project, you learn about something new, and you're just dealing with so much data on the day-to-day that it's like, okay, I need a pretty big machine. I'm going to need, making sure that we're going to have enough storage on the project. And so like little things like that, which I didn't have to think about before. It's like, right, okay, this is, it's a little bit different, but it's fun for future projects. So.
It's amazing to hear you talk about this, because we as viewers, if you do your job right, totally take this for granted. That's the whole point, is that we wouldn't notice any sort of change in lighting and hair and makeup and location, even though you're piecing this together from data on a giant server. I mean, that's an incredibly impressive task.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And that's the thing with filmmaking, that is, if it's seamless, it's done correctly, but you also realize like sound is another thing too. When you're dealing with sound and sound effects, people walking on a floor, putting a glass of water down on a table, like a phone ring, none of that's practical sound. All of that is done in post, because you have to get the microphone so close to that element on set, like it's going to be in the camera. It'd be in the view of the camera. So a glass of water, an actor sipping water, the sound of it going down somebody's throat, all done in post. So so much of it is so, and if it's done well, it is seamless, and it's real life, right? It's something that you and I can relate to. Oh, they're thirsty, they're drinking water, all of that. So it does, and it's quite amazing. And I will say it's fulfilling to then go to a premiere of a movie that you worked on with all the crew that you guys, that we know that, hey, we just did this, you know, and it's just it's a nice pat on the back, and that's really fulfilling. I mean, it's just to be there, you know, and just like, wow, that took a year and a half of my life to do that type of thing, but it was worth it. So
an art form with so mmany layers. I mean, the film geek in me is geeking right now, thinking about all of the different components that make movie magic. It's incredibly impressive, and we thank you so much for sharing all about your experience working on the big screen. It's so much fun to hear about and learn about. And we are going to transition to an exciting second session of this interview, and it is called Rapid Fire. So I am going to ask you very short questions and get your take, the Marshall Rainey take on this. And the first one is an especially fun one. It's a yes or no question. Will robots ultimately come for your job?
No.
Why?
They will come for half of the jobs, but you need human interaction. You have to have humans to be a part of it in some capacity.
Question number 2, is social media the best or the worst?
Both.
I have one more yes or no question for you, and it is, does pineapple belong on pizza?
Yes. Absolutely.
That's a confident answer.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. Marshall, is there anything else you'd like us to know before we wrap up?
Just follow your dream and stick with it and be confident with it, you know? Just go for it, because you never know if you don't go, if you don't try it, you never will know.
That's an incredibly, incredibly important message. And got one last question for you. What big ideas excite you right now?
So I have a buddy that works at SpaceX, and just the technology that they're using with understanding just what we don't know and gaining that knowledge and about, like I was able to witness a rocket launch up in Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is about 2.5 hours north of Los Angeles. And seeing that, and then having him just like describe to me like what the satellites were going to do for that specific launch, it was just like, wow. I mean, I know I'm working with technology too, but I'm not, tracking the water temperatures of the oceans type of thing, right? So like that was fascinating to me. I mean, I think that with technology too, there can be some very good with what we can do and help out in so many different ways that technology can be beneficial to our society. Because I think too, with what we don't know excites me, because there's always something else to learn. There's always something else a story to hear, somebody else's perspective, and it can change our views. I think that's really important as we, pre-COVID, as we grow as a global, just society, international society, it's so important to always keep an open mind to a different culture, a different perspective, because it does humble you, and it just makes you realize like what you're grateful for and maybe what you can change of your personal life and take it back and implement that in your personal life.
Marshall, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this podcast episode. I think you've given us such a great message of collaboration and creativity, and also that confidence and open-mindedness that's really important for both youth and adults these days. So thank you so much for giving us a peek into your life.
Well, thank you for having me, Paige.
We would like to acknowledge that this episode of What's the Big Idea was recorded on land originally inhabited and cultivated by the Lenape, Shawnee, and Ute nations. We are grateful for this land and for the people who have stewarded it for generations. This episode was produced by Kelsey Selleck, with additional material provided by Renee Rainville and Johnny Wells, with music by Kevin MacLeod. Special thanks to our guest Marshall Rainey for joining us today. You can see more of Marshall's work in the upcoming DC movie, The Flash. To learn more about our show and about DI, visit us at destinationimagination.org. If you'd like to inspire even more big ideas for young people around the world, consider making a charitable contribution to DI at destinationimagination.org/donate. I'm Paige Curtis. Thanks for listening to this episode of What's the Big Idea?
The U.S. Department of Labor estimates that 65% of today's students will be employed in jobs that have yet to be invented. We have no way of knowing what those jobs will entail, but we do know that the skills that will prepare them for success are the skills that they develop through destination imagination. Hi, I'm Johnny Wells, Director of Education for Destination Imagination. Before joining the staff, I was a team manager for over 40 teams. Being a team manager is still one of the most rewarding experiences for me, as I watched hundreds of students thrive and grow. Destination Imagination, or DI, is an international project-based competition that reinforces the 4 C's: creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. You probably heard about those skills in today's episode, and DI is the place where kids like yours develop those skills for themselves. Students work together in small teams to create solutions to an open-ended challenge. DI's team challenges fall into one of 7 categories: scientific, technical, engineering, fine arts, improvisation, service learning, or, for the younger children, early learning. A DI team selects one of these 7 challenges and prepares a solution to present at a local tournament. Throughout the experience, students create projects, solve problems, build relationships, learn new concepts, and have a great time in the process. We're building the workforce of the future. Today's DI participants are tomorrow's innovators, problem solvers, and leaders. If that sounds like a good fit for you and the young people in your life, we'd love to have you join us. To get started today, visit destinationimagination.org/learn more.